episode 89 of the Real World Wellness Podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Lehman, a nutritional therapy practitioner and the reverse diabetes coach, which is also the name of my website. I see clients in person and remotely, so you do not have to be in the United States or even locally in the Washington, D.C. area for us to have a consultation. Please remember while you're listening to the show, advice and information we provide is intended to be helpful and informative, but is not a substitute for medical treatment or advice. So today I'm going to launch a two-part series on thyroid health and what is considered thyroid disease. And it's fairly common, unfortunately, especially among women. And I have the pleasure of interviewing my former co-host, Stephanie Ewals, who is also a nutritional therapy practitioner. So this is a pre-recorded interview that we did in late 2015. And part one deals with a primer basically on the thyroid, what it is, what it functions, what its function is, and the thyroid hormones, and advice for what to talk about when you see your doctor, maybe when to switch doctors, what questions to ask. And also part two will focus more specifically on Hashimoto's disease, which is common among people with hypothyroidism, and Graves' disease. So I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast, and remember to stay tuned for part two.
And so do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I just thought for the visual learners in the audience, maybe speaking of anatomy, where you could tell us where the thyroid gland is located.
Hey, that's a really good question. It did not. The problem I sometimes have is remembering that people don't know the same information that I do, and I just take that for granted sometimes. So thank you for asking that, because it's a simple question, but a question that is a good question for a lot of people don't know. So your thyroid gland is around your neck. It sort of is a butterfly-shaped gland that is below your Adam's apple and then sort of wraps around your neck. And it's connected with the parathyroid gland, which has nothing to do with your thyroid, but I think it's called that because it's connected to the thyroid gland. So, and the thyroid is so very important to your well-being. It is important to your ability to sleep. If you have thyroid problems, you have body problems. If you have lots of problems, actually, your body is so dependent on your thyroid working properly that even the slightest change in how it is working can affect you in ways that you probably don't even realize. There are, I think I always kind of go around in my head with information, but there are 300 million people suffering from hypothyroidism alone, and over half of those people are misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, and the reason for that is because of the way that conventional medicine tests for it, and some doctors just don't even think to test for it, and I'll try to remember to get into that a little more later. I don't want to get too off track. So your thyroid is the master metabolic regulator. Your metabolism depends on how well your thyroid functions and how well the cells in your body receive the thyroid hormone. Every cell in your body has a receptor for thyroid hormone. And I don't know off the top of my head how many cells our bodies are made of. It's quite a few to make a whole entire person, and each one of those needs thyroid hormone to have the proper amount of energy. Your thyroid does so much more than just manage that part of your metabolism. It's responsible for the weight gain or the weight loss. It affects bone density, your risk of cardiovascular disease, how high or low your cholesterol is, hormonal functioning, depression, anxiety, sleep. Internally, it helps to provide energy to the cells and for the production of energy in the form of ATP, which is a really long word that's hard to pronounce, but it basically is the universal energy currency in the body. Everybody needs it. So your thyroid hormone influences all body functions, including your nerves and bone formation, how nice your hair, skin, and teeth are, and even your mental function. So you might think that may think that you're crazy, and you're not. There's the woman who wrote Stop the Thyroid Madness book, which is a fantastic book anybody with thyroid problems should read. Her mother was actually given electroshock therapy because her thyroid was misdiagnosed. So it can literally, if it's untreated, you can literally go crazy. You're not crazy. It's your thyroid not working properly, but it affects your mental function so deeply. Even if you're treated with medication, some of the major symptoms of thyroid problems, especially hypothyroid problems, is really just irritability and your ability to fly off the handle for no apparent reason. I really struggle with that too. I feel a little bit guilty as a parent being diagnosed with hypothyroidism when my son was born. So I had, a 2-year-old daughter, a newborn son, and they now had this mom with hypothyroidism, and they really never knew the old me, which I think is unfortunate, because so many people lose themselves with this disease. Mm-hmm. You have to almost find a new normal. It's really difficult, excuse me, to be treated well on something like Synthroid, and we'll talk about that. Some people do great on it, but the majority of people do not. So,
right. So you were talking about being tired. It definitely affects your energy, and then you also mentioned depression. And I was just wondering if, because we talked about it a little bit in a previous episode, that are you saying you can be misdiagnosed with depression?
You can, yeah. I mean, I think it causes depression, but depression medication is not the answer to that. It is fixing the thyroid medication and getting it. I mean, there's another really great book out there by Dr. Datis Karazian, Why Do I Still Have Thyroid Symptoms When My Labs Are Normal? It's a very long title, but he says if you catch it early enough, there really is only one form of hypothyroidism that actually needs the hormone replacement medication. That in and of itself is a couple hours long to talk about. So you can check out that book if you want to learn more about that, and we'll provide links to the books in the show notes.
Right. It sounds like the root cause is the thyroid. Is that?
Yeah. That's really because it slows you down. So you don't want to get out of bed. You really sometimes can't get out of bed. I remember, I think I've talked about this before, when I was first diagnosed, sleeping for 8 to 10 hours and really feeling like I hadn't slept at all. So you just don't want to get out of bed. But I had 2 little kids. I didn't have a choice. I had to get out of bed. And it's sort of been that way ever since my diagnosis. I have never had the choice. And a lot of people don't, but you find a lot of people can't work anymore. It really, really, really can take over your life if it's untreated. So that's why we're talking about it.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, so your hypothalamus, which is part of your brain, is responsible for putting out thyrotropin-releasing hormone, which is also known as thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. This is what is commonly tested for in conventional doctors' offices and the only number many doctors go by. Your pituitary gland, which is part of the hypothalamus and is in part of your brain, puts out TSH as well. Your thyroid is responsible for putting out T4, or thyroxine, which is made up of about 65% iodine, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And T3, which is also known as triiodothyroxine, when it receives a message from TSH. So thyroid puts out T4 and T3 when it receives the message from the thyroid stimulating hormone, which is sent from your brain or your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland. T4 gets its name because it has one molecule of tyrosine, which is an amino acid, and 4 molecules of iodine. So tyrosine, like I said, is an amino acid that is part of most proteins and is needed for the synthesis of some hormones. So to synthesize means that 2 or more things need to come together to create something else. Tyrosine is not listed as an essential amino acid by standard definitions, but there are some doctors and nutritionists who call it a conditionally essential amino acid. And what this means is that the body can make it on its own, but if the other components needed to make it are not in the body, then the body won't be able to make it. I hope that makes sense. So in order for tyrosine to be produced by the body, you need vitamin C, you need folate, and you need SAMe, which is part of the methylation process. That also has a really long name. I decided just to shorten it because we're not going to go into what it really means. It's an enzyme that works in the methylation process. So tyrosine's main function is to convert the active T3 hormone as your body needs it. And it's converting it from T4 to T3. Around 40% of T4 converts to T3, and the rest is converted to something called reverse T3, which is unusable by the body. So it only converts what it needs, and then it turns the rest into this reverse T3, which is something your body can't use.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I just wanted to clarify. I think you explained conditional essential amino acids very well, but just in terms of the vitamin C, folate, and SAMe, are you suggesting that people, they have to get it externally? Is that what you mean? Because if it's, typically I think of supplements and things like that.
For vitamin C, folate.
Yeah.
Well, ideally, of course, you would want to get it from your diet, but you may need to supplement. I believe most people with hypothyroidism for sure need to be supplementing with a really high quality B6 complex. So that's where you're going to get your folate, which is going to help with the SAMe. But if you have MTHFR gene mutations, you probably are going to need to supplement. And that could be, again, that's a whole nother podcast.
Right. And you can easily get those measured. And if
yes.
if your lab tests show that you're inadequate, your levels are too low, then of course you can start out supplementing. But you're right. You usually want to try and get them from your diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And the best way to get your folate and your vitamin C is from fruits and vegetables. And folate especially is found in leafy greens. But if your body, again, doesn't have that ability to convert the folate into the 5-MTHF, then you're going to need to supplement. And that's where my B complex comes in. It's got 5-MTHF in it. And it's also got a methylcobalamin, which is a B12, which is another common deficiency for people with thyroid problems. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you probably will need to supplement, but having a really clean diet is really going to help a lot. So T3, the triiodothyronine, has 3 molecules of iodine. That's where the 3 comes from. For the 1 molecule of tyrosine, and around 20% of your total thyroid hormone production is T3. And this one is what is responsible for your energy or lack of energy and your overall feeling of well-being. Aside from becoming active by T4 losing that iodine molecule, you make a little bit of T3 in your gut, which is why it's important to have a healthy gut. And I have not had my labs yet done, so I've been 6 weeks on the autoimmune protocol. I go in for blood tests in another 3 weeks, so I'll find out if it's helped my numbers at all. For a year, my TSH has been high and my T4 and T3 have also been off, and I can't remember in which direction, but really doesn't matter because either way, you're not going to feel well. So I'm hoping that I see some difference in my numbers.
Keep us posted.
Yeah, and I am lucky enough to have a doctor who will treat me by my symptoms as well as by the lab, so she doesn't go just by that. And, those doctors are hard to find. You really have to advocate for yourself. Anyway, so there are other parts of the thyroid hormones that are important but have not been studied as much. There's T2, and it's not as well studied, but it is thought to play a role in helping T4 convert to T3 and also in boosting your metabolism. So it may play a role in your ability to lose weight, which is a common struggle for hypothyroid sufferers. And then you have T1, also not as well studied or not really all that well known about, but it is thought to play a role in heart health, and maybe why heart disease is a long-term side effect of people using T4 only medications. And then there's also a T0. Nobody really knows a whole lot about that, and I'm sure it's not studied well because the drug companies produce T4 only medication. The biggest manufactured drug is Synthroid.
Mm-hmm.
And, so they're not going to push for learning more about T0, T1, and T2 because their medication is T4 only.
Right. And I think it's also just kind of a little bit of an aside, but when you're talking about T1, T2, and so on, you're really talking about, just from a science point of view, being the nerd here, 2 molecules of iodine. So in other words, except for T0, they all have at least 1 molecule of iodine in them.
Yeah, right. That's what the numbers mean.
Yeah. And is that significant, the iodine?
It is. It used to be all over the rest of the world. It is the main lack of iodine is the main cause of hypothyroidism in the rest of the world. In the U.S., the main cause is Hashimoto's, and I don't know a whole lot about the role that iodine plays. Aside from that, if you have Hashimoto's, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire to supplement with iodine. It can really mess things up. So, and being that like 80% of people in the U.S. with hypothyroidism have Hashimoto's, and a lot of those people are undiagnosed as well, it's not a good idea to supplement with iodine until you know for sure that you have it or not. And that's a simple test of your antibodies, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, iodine plays a huge role in your thyroid.
Does that mean that people are deficient in iodine?
Yes. But that's in the rest of the world. Here, I think it's because we get too much.
Okay.
Because it's in our food supply.
Okay.
So T4 gets converted to T3 in the liver. So if you don't have I'll talk about that in a second. T4 also gets bound up by a protein called thyroid binding globulin. And when it gets bound up by the TBG, so does T3, and it remains bound up until it gets transported to where it needs to be. So that's sort of the carrier protein that brings it to the cells. If your liver isn't working well, which is common for those of us with thyroid problems, or if it is busy doing other things like managing your blood sugar or clearing out alcohol or toxins from your daily life, it may not do a great job at binding T4 and T3. This would mean that you would have too much free T3 or free T4 floating around your bloodstream. When T4 and T3 are free, it means they're not bound and can get into the cells, which can lead to a sort of a burnout at the cellular level. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds like free T4 and T3 interferes with the binding process. Is that how you would kind of summarize that, or is that incorrect?
honestly, I can't answer that for sure. I don't want to say the wrong thing and confuse somebody. So
Yeah, I just thought I read it somewhere. So
you could be right, but gosh, my brain is full. So I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, that's fine.
So if your liver makes too much thyroid binding globulin, again, that's the protein that transports the thyroid hormone to the cell, you will bind too much hormone and you will not have enough thyroid hormone getting to the cells. So it's a very delicate procedure, if you will, to make this happen properly. Because this is where you see hypothyroid symptoms occurring. Geez, I can't talk today. Common symptoms include, but are not limited to, and there are at least 100 symptoms. But the biggies are things like chronic fatigue, low stamina, poor concentration, tired upon waking, weight gain and unable to lose that weight, poor or large appetite. So it can really go either way. Cold hands and feet, intolerance to cold or hot, poor immune function, slow speech, yeast overgrowth, swelling, and throat issues. I have had of these: chronic fatigue, low stamina, poor concentration, tired upon waking. I didn't have too much trouble with weight gain, but a little bit. I had trouble losing like that extra 20 pounds after my last kid was born. Constantly have cold hands and feet. I'm very intolerant to hot or cold. I have poor immune function. When I was first diagnosed, I had slow speech. I had a yeast overgrowth. And the only throat issues I have, which I think is common for people with thyroid problems, is they don't like things around their throat. So I don't wear like turtlenecks, or I wear scarves sometimes as long as they're loose. I don't like necklaces too tight on my neck. So very, very common issue for people. And I do get occasional hair loss, which is a real common symptom too for people. They'll find a lot of hair on their brush, or you'll find a lot in the drain in the shower. It's very, very common. At one point, my hair loss was so bad, my hairdresser asked me if everything was okay because so much came out. And thankfully, I have thick hair, so I've never had an issue with that. And I can tell when things aren't right because I'll lose more occasionally, a couple times a year. It's really crazy. So anyway.
But I think what's interesting too, when you're listing off these symptoms, is that some of these kind of transcend, hypothyroid. For example, I get cold hands, but I just chalk that up, to poor circulation. I don't tolerate the cold very well. It's one reason I don't like it. But it's really probably, I mean, is it correct to say it's a sort of you have to have a certain number of symptoms when to get the diagnosis? Because some people could say, well, I had trouble losing weight, and you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. It's just like anything. So many of these symptoms do belong to other dis-ease as well. Or even, it just could be genetically you are intolerant to cold, which you shouldn't be because of your Norwegian heritage.
I know. My joke is my blood got diluted in North Africa.
Yeah, I think so. It could be a genetic thing. It could be you just don't tolerate it. You have to just, if anybody Googles hypothyroid symptoms, you'll find a list. And if you have, 10 or more, you probably want to get your thyroid checked. It's such a common thing in, 300 million people.
Yeah, that's huge. And that must be worldwide, I would think.
I think it is. Yeah. But welcome to the club.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, don't all of a sudden think if you can't lose weight or you're gaining weight, it's a good idea to have it checked, but don't automatically think that that's the problem.
And is that part of a routine physical, or do you have to ask?
It can be. No, I don't. The way I was diagnosed, I went in for a sciatic nerve, and the doctor said, "Is there anything else that I can help you with?" And I said, "I'm really tired. but I just kind of thought that was because I had a baby and I have a toddler. He's like, well, let's check your thyroid. So, you can ask, but again, all he tested was my TSH. Granted, my TSH was 150, where conventional medicine puts normal between like 3 and 5.5.
Mm-hmm.
So mine was way off. But functional medicine likes to see it between 1 and 2. So if you're at a 3 or a 5, you probably have a slightly hypo-functioning thyroid and could use a little boost. Whether, it's from, if you're only at like that, like between a 3 and a 5, I would try some diet and lifestyle changes before you go on medication.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. And I would find a doctor who will test more than just your TSH, because the TSH isn't even telling, it's just telling you how much your brain is telling you how it's telling, TSH tells you how much your brain is telling your thyroid to put out or how hard to work.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. It's not telling you whether or not your thyroid is actually working. It's maybe, sort of indicative of there being an issue with your thyroid, but it's not actually testing the hormone in your blood. So, anyhow, so a healthy functioning liver is critical to healthy thyroid hormone functioning. Your liver is responsible for converting T3 into reverse T3. Remember, that's the form that's unusable by the body. And there's an enzyme called tetraiodothyronine 5 deiodinase that removes a molecule of iodine, making T3 into reverse T3. This happens in higher stress situations when the body feels it is time for you to slow down. This enzyme is dependent upon the mineral selenium to make this happen. So, if you're living a life with chronic stress, your body may just slow you down on purpose if you can't do it yourself. Like if you can't take, 5 minutes a day to just meditate or do some deep breathing or find a way to rid your body of some of that stress. And it's not only it's mental, emotional stress, but also physical. The overconsumption of sugar, eating all the standard American diet, so all the processed food or, fast food, or eating out with all of the seed oils and things like that, that all stresses your body. And eventually your body's going to say, I have had enough. And one way it will do that is to slow you down on purpose. So something to think about.
Mother Nature's wake-up call.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you wanted to,
you actually, I think you did a good job of talking about that, and especially also in the episode we did on vitamins and minerals. So I think we could.
Okay.
Move on.
So there are components of T3 called T3 sulfate and T3 acetic acid that are turned into usable T3 in the gut by your beneficial gut bacteria. So it's around 20% of your T3 is produced by your gut bacteria. Healing your gut and maintaining a good balance of beneficial bacteria can help tremendously if you are suffering from thyroid problems. So you would go back and listen to the episode on prebiotics and probiotics, and really all the general ones about the beginnings of what good nutrition is, so that you know where to start with this. Your digestive symptoms can also be affecting your thyroid. Gut problems, inflammation, the backed up liver, or a congested liver is another way to put that. Food sensitivities, stress, as I talked about. Heavy metal burden is a big one. Fungus, parasites, and viruses. These are all, those last four, especially heavy metal burden, funguses, parasites, and viruses, are often root causes of Hashimoto's. And it's going to be different for everybody. Any of these can end up affecting your thyroid, and you just got to figure out what it is that is within you that is causing these issues.
And it could be, I'm sorry, could it be a combination of these things too?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Could be all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it can definitely, it's more than likely not just one. And it can be a virus like Epstein-Barr, or if you had mono as a kid, and that lives within you forever, the way I understand it, and that can play a role in you getting this disease. So you just got to figure out which one or what it is that caused it for you. So if the balance of your gut bacteria is off or out of balance, this is called dysbiosis. When you have dysbiosis, it affects the conversion of T4 to T3 in the gut. So you definitely want to embark on a gut healing diet to find healing in this issue. Neurotoxins like lipopolysaccharides affect the cell receptors and their ability to accept T3 into the cells. So lipopolysaccharides are molecules found in bacteria that stimulate the immune system and affect intestinal permeability or leaky gut. It is common in someone with gut dysbiosis to have more lipopolysaccharides in their system. And it's also thought that these neurotoxins can affect your brain's ability to converse with your body, which can decrease the amount of TSH secreted from the hypothalamus. And I'll leave a link to a study there for that.
Yeah, I thought the polysaccharides of the lipopolysaccharides it's actually non-toxic, and it's the lipid A part that's responsible for the toxic activities of these bacteria, and it can cause all sorts of problems, including septic shock. So I thought that was really pretty amazing.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And dysbiosis in the gut means your neurotransmitter production is affected, and your neurotransmitters affect how your hypothalamus produces TSH, among many other things. Like I was saying, how I was feeling, my mood is so much better. It very well could be related to that.
Sure, because the neurotransmitters, those are the chemical responsible for your chemicals in your brain.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
Yeah. So approximately 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut, as we talked about, which is also called your gastrointestinal tract, or in mainly your small intestines. If there is dysbiosis in the gut, there is inflammation, and inflammation can also affect how well the hypothalamus releases TSH. So things you can do to help your body, mainly clean up your diet. You can support your liver with foods that love the liver, and I've talked about this before in the vitamins and minerals. The list is long of foods that love the liver, but some of my favorites are lettuce, cauliflower, cabbage, avocados, chicken, broccoli, garlic, onions, coconut, oranges, specifically acerola cherries, kale, and parsley. You can also supplement with a good liver support. Milk thistle has been used for years. And you need to also clean up your environment of body, face, hair care products, as well as your cleaning supplies and your laundry detergent. Avoiding alcohol and eating a paleo-style diet and committing to that lifestyle will also do great things to clean up the liver and your health in general. So go ahead.
No, I can just hear our listeners say, alcohol.
Yeah, well, if your body is processing alcohol, the liver, more specifically, it can't do anything else. So any of those toxins in your body, any of those extra hormones in your body, it can't conjugate any of those as long as it is processing the alcohol out of your system. So it's, really, really important, at least for a short time, to avoid alcohol completely so that you can give your body a chance to clean itself up.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to make sure that you're digesting your food well, and you may need digestive enzymes or even supplementing with hydrochloric acid, which is a stomach acid supplement. Betaine HCl is usually what it's called. You may need probiotics. Eating fermented foods like homemade sauerkraut is one of the best ways to do that. Make your own yogurt if you can. To some people, this may just be overwhelming and seem crazy, but those are two of the really easiest things you can do in your kitchen. It's pretty hard to screw them up. There's a lot of information either online or go to your local library. There's some great books out there on how to ferment foods. And we're going to have Jill
Ciccarelli.
Yeah. I don't want to butcher her name. We're going to have her on soon to talk about in March. Is that right?
Yes, I believe it's March. It's in the spring, and she wrote a book that called Fermented. So she will be talking about all things fermented.
Yeah, so that'll be a good one to listen to. It'll be fermented foods are so good for everybody, but very much especially for those of us with gut issues. And then working with a holistic practitioner is helpful for anyone diagnosed with thyroid problems. Things that a practitioner can or should address with anyone having hypothyroidism or even hyperthyroid issues such as Graves is addressing your adrenal glands. These are little walnut-sized glands that sit on top of your kidneys. They are small but mighty, and our everyday stressful lives wear them out. They help manage your blood sugar and to manage stress, two things that people with thyroid issues usually struggle with. And I know for myself, even after I have such a clean diet, I've been helping my adrenals for 3 years at the least. I still, any tiny amount of stress, I really, really struggle with managing it well. And it ends up affecting my sleep in the form of nightmares where I wake up with a racing heart. It's the craziest thing. I'm still working on it. And that's kind of the thing with nutritional therapy too. It's not an overnight fix. It can take a while for somebody to really feel like themselves again. But anyway, yeah.
And I think too, sometimes, with clients with diabetes, sometimes, it's taken at least a couple years to get to that point. So, as you said, it often, of course, takes time to reverse it.
Yes. Yeah. That's something people always need to keep in mind. Because conventional, often prescription drugs make you feel better quicker, but it's really just a Band-Aid masking the symptoms that are still there. So that's just something to think about. And then T4 only medications like Synthroid wear out the adrenals because they end up working harder to keep you going. And there's a lot of science behind that, which is too much to go into. Signs of adrenal fatigue are things like anxiety, nervousness, unable to cope with stress, being impatient, having irritation with other people, dizziness upon standing, racing heart, sleep problems, low blood sugar, and craving salt. Managing your diet and your blood sugar are very important to good health, but also for good thyroid health. Figuring out what caused your thyroid to stop working properly is also important. Things like postpartum hypothyroid is very common. Chemical toxicity from things like bromide, which is found in seafood and displaces iodine, meaning iodine can't get to where it needs to go. And fluoride, which also displaces iodine, which is in a lot of city water supplies. I know it is in mine, as well as chlorine, which is another one that you want to avoid. Bromide is also found in store-bought bread, in vegetable oils. Brominated vegetable oil is in a citrusy soda pop in a green can. And pesticides, plastics, carpets, and mattresses. It's like everywhere.
Yeah. So how would you know? Just by reading, like even on carpets or mattresses? Obviously, you'd have to investigate a little bit to find out, right?
Yeah, you would have to investigate. I mean, the only way, like avoiding plastics as much as possible, is really the best way to.
And good for the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then pesticides. Buy your Clean 15, and stay away from the Dirty Dozen. Go to the environmentalworkinggroup.org or just Google EWG, Clean 15, Dirty Dozen, and you can find the list of the fruits and vegetables you should avoid buying conventional. At the very least, do that, as well as, cleaning up your environment like I talked about. Getting not enough or too much iodine. This iodine is the Goldilocks mineral because the amount you get needs to be just right. And same selenium deficiency is big, depleted from the soil and is therefore depleted from our food. It's responsible for the conversion of T4 to T3 in the liver. And it's mostly, if you supplement with selenium, it's you're helping your liver. And if you have any white spots on your fingernails, it's a common sign of selenium deficiency. I've also heard it can be a zinc deficiency, but I actually heard Chris Masterjohn, who works with the Weston A. Price Foundation. He's a PhD and he works in nutrition. I heard it come from his mouth. Selenium deficiency causes the white spots on your nails, so I'm sticking with that. And I had that problem and I supplemented with selenium and it went away.
Interesting.
Yeah, my nails are so much nicer now too. So I think that selenium really helped. So my body was really robbing it from other places in order to use it in the liver, and it probably still wasn't getting enough. So that one has been a real lifesaver for me. If your pituitary gland isn't producing TSH, it can mean that there's a tumor there, and that's more rare. Head or neck trauma, interestingly enough, things like whiplash can actually be a trigger to hypothyroidism. I've also heard that can be the case with cancer. Any sort of trauma to a certain area of your body can trigger some of those cells or genes to be turned on. So,
and I would
happen.
think maybe if you have cancer of the throat.
Well, thyroid cancer is really common, so it could cause cancer there. I'm not sure if cancer of the throat is related to that, but my cousin had thyroid cancer, and I don't know that hers was caused by any sort of trauma. I have never asked her, but maybe I will now. But she did. Interesting story. She could not get pregnant, so they adopted 3 kids. She had thyroid cancer, had her thyroid removed, was put on medication, and got pregnant.
Interesting.
So I really think that fertility as well can be definitely affected by your thyroid not working properly. And that's just my own anecdote. But I really believe it. But I'm sure maybe a doctor would say something different. Lithium is another one that used to treat psychiatric issues such as bipolar disorder. This drug keeps your body from making thyroid hormones, so it can put you into hypothyroidism. And same with some medications for epilepsy and also some heart medications can all cause hypothyroidism. And menopause and estrogen dominance can screw up your thyroid function. And just as the same as getting older, my father-in-law, who is at least 85 or 86, told me, I was telling him about my debacle with my medication, how they switched it and I wasn't sleeping. And he just had his thyroid tested and he is hypothyroid, and, so it just slows down after a while. And then mercury and environmental toxins like smoking and chronic stress. Also, we talked about that a lot. I personally had a mouthful of amalgam fillings, and I believe that may have contributed or turned on some of this issue for me, because everybody in my mother's family has thyroid problems. So I feel like it might have been bound to happen. I'm much easily susceptible to it, at least. So,
yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. And Hashimoto's is the biggest cause of hypothyroidism, as I talked about. So, we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. So there are only a few medication options. Well, there's more than a few. I'm not going to go over all of them. But most doctors will use Synthroid, which is the synthetic T4 only medication, and Armour is often prescribed, which is a natural desiccated thyroid hormone derived from the thyroid gland of a pig. It has, so T4 only medication is just that, T4 only. The natural desiccated thyroid hormone has T0, T1, T2, T3, and T4, and all in the right amounts that your body needs. So,
is that common, that the Armour? Because I get clients with who are on Synthroid and have yet to see Armour. So I'm just wondering if that's more naturopathic or
a lot of conventional doctors are told, so Armour was used for years and years and years. It was the drug when hypothyroidism was first discovered. And then somebody went into the lab and produced it synthetically, this T4 only medication. And then it's just as with anything else in big pharma, these drug reps started telling doctors that the Armour was bad, and this lab made T4 is better, and so it just fell out of use, and Synthroid became the most popular thing. And so a lot of doctors are still in that mindset that it's bad because it has the T3. It does affect people differently, and it can cause your heart to race if you take too much of it. So very often when you're given a natural desiccated thyroid hormone, you can't just take 2 pills. You got to give your body time to adjust. So you end up having to take part of your medication in the morning, and then maybe part of it in the afternoon, and then you actually wouldn't even do that to start with. You would start out slow and give your body about 2 weeks to adjust. So then by the time you're at 2 weeks, you're taking that full dose, but you really have to gradually increase it in order to avoid some of those symptoms like the racing heart. And that's not for everybody, but that's some people. And some people do great on Armour. Some people do great on Synthroid. It really is bio-individual. Other T4 brands are Levothyroid and Levoxyl, and funny enough, some of these drugs, like if you have Hashimoto's, Synthroid has lactose, cornstarch, and iodine in it, and very often you'll find people with Hashimoto's to have a dairy intolerance, and then they shouldn't be getting iodine. And some of them have gluten in them, and some people react to the food dyes in the medications. It's just crazy to me. Tyrosint is another type of T4 only medication. It's in a gel capsule, so it has no fillers. It's really the most hypoallergenic synthetic T4 only medication. And some T3 medications are natural desiccated. Well, this first one isn't natural. There's a T3 only medication called Cytomel. So it's synthetic T3, and often Cytomel and Tyrosint are given together, but synthetic T3 can have modified food starch in it, which also has gluten in it, and many people are gluten intolerant who have thyroid issues. And then so back to the doctors, it's hard to get them to test more than TSH, and I felt like I almost had to beg my nurse practitioner to put me on a natural desiccated thyroid hormone. She was willing to do it, but then when she went on maternity leave and they went to refill my prescription, they called me and almost chewed me out. Like, they said, "You realize that this is a T3 medication and this can affect your heart." And I was like, "But I feel great on it." And they were like, "Well, I don't know about that." They refilled it. I never went back. I found another doctor. I was so worried they were going to take that medication away from me, and it had really been helping. So that's the kind of stuff that people are up against.
Yeah, well, that's good information.
Yeah, you really have to be your own advocate, I think. So natural desiccated thyroid hormones are Armour, like we talked about. the formulation has changed. It's now been bought out by another company. So you want to check into that on your own. You can probably just Google Armour Thyroid and find all kinds of information and do some research. A lot of people have trouble absorbing it now because there's cellulose in it. So often people will chew it. And it also has lactose in it. So if you're dairy intolerant, not a good plan for you. Nature-throid and Westhroid are the other two real common natural desiccated thyroid hormones. They're very clean medications, no dyes, no food colorings. Nature-throid has lactose, which I think is the problem I had with it. I'm now on WP-throid, which is a form of Westhroid, I believe. It might be the same company and they might have changed the name. And I'm doing well on that. And I personally bite mine and put it under my tongue and let it go directly into my bloodstream rather than having it go through the liver. And as I said before, everybody does well on a different medication. These formulations change, so be sure to ask your pharmacist to see the ingredient label and also ask for your doctor to prescribe your medication as dispense as written on your prescription, so the pharmacy doesn't give you what they have in stock rather than what is prescribed to you, especially if you're doing well on it.
Hi there. Thanks for your podcast. I love the information you both provide. I just found out that I have hypothyroid and was wondering if being bloated to the point of looking pregnant is normal.
Well, Michelle, thank you for your question. We so appreciate you writing in. This can be very common for people with hypothyroidism, and it is usually a sign of a food intolerance like gluten or dairy. So what I suggest to you is try cutting out gluten, which is the protein found in wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and a couple of other less common grains, and see if that helps. Give it a couple of weeks. If you are unsure about how to start a gluten-free diet, check out any of the books in the resources section of my website, Out of the Woods Nutrition, or Christine's website, Reverse Diabetes Coach, and they can help you along the way. So oftentimes you'll see people who've been gluten exposed have what is called a gluten baby, and that almost instantly happens. It's like your body is not happy, and that's all inflammation being produced. So try cutting it out for at least a couple of weeks. I would encourage you to do it for a month, and then try reintroduce it and see what happens, and let us know.